Cowboys Nation is living through one of those intriguing stretches where every small move feels like it could shape the entire direction of the franchise. And right now, the picture is starting to come into focus. The dust from the first wave of free agency has begun to settle, and what we're seeing is a roster that's quietly shifting rather than exploding with blockbuster headlines. There's a sense that the organization is being calculated, maybe even cautious, but not passive. Every decision, from the smallest contract tweak to letting certain players walk, is part of a bigger strategy that may not be obvious at first glance, but is definitely worth paying attention to as things unfold. One of the more subtle but interesting developments comes from how the team is handling player health and contract structure. There are situations where Dallas is clearly trying to protect itself long-term, especially when it comes to players who have had durability concerns. Instead of simply handing out standard deals, the front office is getting creative, building in layers of protection that might not make headlines, but could become extremely important if injuries come into play later in the season. It's the kind of detail that often goes unnoticed, but reflects a front office that is thinking beyond just the next game and focusing on sustainability across the entire campaign. At the same time, the departures we've seen so far tell their own story. Some players have moved on in search of new opportunities. Others have accepted short-term deals elsewhere to try and rebuild or redefine their roles. This is where the reality of the league really hits. Not every contributor from last season is going to stick around, and sometimes a player who once held a significant role finds himself fighting just to stay on a roster somewhere else. That transition from being a key piece to proving yourself all over again is never easy, and it highlights just how competitive and unforgiving the league can be. What stands out even more is how these exits are impacting the broader outlook for the team, especially when it comes to future draft capital. Typically, when a team loses notable free agents, there's at least some consolation in the form of compensatory picks down the line. But this year, things are shaping up differently. The current projection suggests that Dallas might not benefit from that system at all in the next cycle, which is a rare scenario for a franchise that has often relied on those extra selections to build depth. It's a shift that raises questions, but also opens up a different perspective on how the team is choosing to build its roster moving forward. And honestly, that might not be a bad thing. There's an argument to be made that chasing compensatory picks can sometimes limit your flexibility in free agency. By not playing that game this time around, the Cowboys may be giving themselves more freedom to address needs without worrying about how each signing or departure will affect their future draft positioning. It's a different approach, one that suggests the focus is more on immediate roster balance rather than long-term pick accumulation, and that alone makes this offseason feel a bit unique compared to previous years. Then there's the ongoing conversation about the defensive unit, particularly along the edge. This is where things get really interesting because the team has already made several moves that reshape the depth chart in a significant way. New additions, returning players, and positional adjustments are all blending together to create a group that looks very different from what we saw before. The question now isn't just about talent, but about fit within the evolving defensive scheme. When you bring in new coaching influences and tweak your system, not every player transitions smoothly, and that's something the Cowboys seem to be weighing carefully. There are still familiar names being discussed when it comes to potential returns, but the situation is far from straightforward. Production, playing time, and overall fit all factor into whether it makes sense to bring someone back, and in some cases, the numbers tell a clear story. When a player's impact drops significantly, even if there are understandable reasons behind it, it becomes harder to justify keeping them in the rotation, especially when younger or more versatile options are already in the mix. It's not just about what a player has done, but what they can realistically contribute moving forward in a system that may demand something different from them. As the roster continues to take shape, it's becoming clear that competition will be a defining theme heading into the next phase. Depth is being built in a way that forces players to earn their spots rather than rely on past reputation. That kind of environment can bring out the best in a team, but it also means tough decisions are inevitable. Every signing, every departure, every contract detail is another piece of a puzzle that is still far from complete, And the way those pieces come together over the next few months will ultimately determine how prepared this team is when it's time to step back onto the field. As the front office continues to evaluate what comes next, attention naturally shifts to the remaining free agents still tied to the organization. And this is where things get even more complex. There are several names still floating without a clear destination, and each case carries its own context. Some players could return on low-risk deals to provide depth, while others feel like they've already played their final snap in Dallas. The difference often comes down to role, cost, and how well they fit into the evolving identity of the team. It's not just about talent anymore. It's about alignment with what the coaching staff wants to build from this point forward. Looking at the offensive side of the ball, the situation feels relatively stable, but there are still small gaps that could be addressed with the right moves. Depth along the line remains something to monitor closely, especially considering how quickly injuries can reshape an entire unit during the season. Bringing back a familiar face for rotational support wouldn't be surprising, particularly if it comes at a team-friendly price. These are not the types of signings that dominate headlines, but they are often the ones that prove crucial when the grind of the season starts to take its toll. Defensively, however, the conversation carries a bit more urgency. There are still questions about how certain roles will be filled and whether the current group has enough proven production to hold up against high-powered offenses. This is where decisions made earlier in the offseason start to echo louder. When you commit to younger players or new additions, you are essentially betting on potential and development rather than relying on established consistency. That gamble can pay off in a big way, but it also introduces a level of uncertainty that cannot be ignored. This brings an added sense of tension as the off-season calendar keeps moving. The closer it gets to major milestones, the more pressure builds to reach agreements or make definitive decisions. Players and agents begin to weigh their options more carefully, and the team has to decide whether to push forward aggressively or hold their ground. It's a delicate balance, one that can shape not just the upcoming season, but the structure of the roster for years to come. All of these moving parts are unfolding while the team also keeps an eye on the bigger picture, including the upcoming draft and how it can be used to reinforce key areas. The lack of additional compensatory picks puts even more emphasis on making the most out of their existing selections. Every pick carries added importance, and the margin for error becomes smaller. That reality only increases the significance of the decisions being made right now, because the success of those choices will directly influence how flexible the team can be when new talent enters the equation. There's also a growing sense that the Cowboys are positioning themselves for internal competition to drive improvement rather than relying heavily on external reinforcements. This approach puts a spotlight on younger players who may not have had extended opportunities yet, but are now expected to take meaningful steps forward. Development becomes a central theme, and the coaching staff's ability to unlock that potential could end up being one of the most important factors in determining how successful this roster truly is when the season begins. At the same time, the adjustments in scheme continue to influence nearly every conversation surrounding the team. When a new defensive vision is implemented, it reshapes responsibilities, alters alignments, and demands a different type of execution from players across the board. Some athletes thrive in that kind of transition, adapting quickly and finding new ways to impact the game, while others struggle to adjust and see their roles diminish. That natural shift is already starting to take shape, even before training camp arrives, and it's something that could redefine the identity of the unit as a whole. Another element that cannot be ignored is how leadership within the locker room evolves during periods like this. When familiar faces depart and new ones arrive, the dynamic inevitably changes. Veterans who remain are often asked to take on greater responsibility, not just in terms of performance, but also in setting the tone for preparation and accountability. That internal leadership can be the difference between a team that simply has talent and one that is truly cohesive when facing adversity throughout a long and demanding season. From a strategic standpoint, there is also an interesting balance being struck between short-term flexibility and long-term planning. One-year deals, modest guarantees, and calculated risks all point toward a front office that wants to maintain maneuverability. Instead of locking themselves into heavy commitments across the board, they are leaving room to adjust as new information becomes available, whether that comes from player performance, injuries, or unexpected opportunities that arise later in the year. The wide receiver room is another area quietly drawing attention, especially after recent changes in personnel. Roles that once seemed clearly defined are now more fluid, and that opens the door for competition that could reshape the depth chart entirely. Players who were previously seen as complementary pieces might now find themselves with a chance to take on a larger workload, while others will need to prove they can maintain consistency under increased expectations. That kind of internal battle often brings out the best in a group, but it also makes every practice and preseason snap that much more significant. On the defensive side, depth along the front continues to be evaluated with a critical eye. Even with multiple additions and returning players, there's always a need for reliable rotation pieces who can maintain intensity without a drop in performance. The physical demands of the position make it essential to have options, and the Cowboys appear to be building a group where versatility plays a key role. Being able to shift players into different alignments, depending on the situation, adds another layer of unpredictability that could benefit the defense over the course of a full season. All of these developments are unfolding in a way that suggests the Cowboys are not chasing quick fixes, but instead trying to construct a roster that can adapt and grow as the season progresses. The decisions being made now may not generate immediate excitement, but they're laying the groundwork for how the team will respond when challenges inevitably arise. And as the offseason continues to move forward, every move, every adjustment, and every evaluation adds another layer to a story that is still being written in real time. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. Rumors are beginning to swirl around a potential high-impact move involving veteran linebacker Bobby Wagner and the Dallas Cowboys, a pairing that could reshape the identity of the team's defense and locker room leadership. League insiders have quietly hinted that Dallas may be exploring the addition of the seasoned defensive anchor, a player widely respected not only for his on-field production, but also for his commanding presence among teammates. While no formal negotiations have been confirmed, the mere possibility of Wagner arriving in Texas has sparked intense speculation across NFL circles. The Cowboys have long been in search of a unifying voice on defense, someone capable of elevating communication, discipline, and accountability. Wagner, known for his football IQ and leadership traits, fits that mold almost too perfectly. Even at this stage of his career, he remains a highly productive force, capable of reading offenses and dictating tempo from the middle of the field. Sources suggest that Dallas values more than just stats in this potential move. The organization is believed to be prioritizing experience and composure, especially in high-pressure moments. Wagner's reputation as a mentor could prove invaluable for a defensive unit filled with emerging talent, but still seeking consistency in critical situations. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.